Assalamualaikum and Hi. Today we want to present about inflation. Inflation is a continuous increase in the general price level of goods and services in the economy. Since inflation refers to continuous increase in the general price level, then it does not mean that every goods and services need to increase. It is only the average increase. There are various degrees of inflation, such as creeping inflation, mild inflation, and hyperinflation. Creeping inflation is a sustained rise in prices. Mild inflation is a sustained rise in price by about 8% to 10%, and hyperinflation is when the price of goods and services rise more than 15% per month. To measure the rate of inflation, the Consumer Price Index (CPI) is used. CPI is an index that measures changes in the average price of consumer goods and services. To calculate inflation rate, CPI this year minus CPI previous year divided by CPI previous year and multiplied by 100.
Cause of inflation. There are three causes of inflation, which are demand inflation, cost-push inflation, and government printing money. Demand inflation occurs when aggregate demand exceeds the aggregate supply. The causes of a rise in aggregate demand may be due to the rise of consumer demand, an increase in the level of government expenditure, a rise in investment by firms, and an increase in demand for the country's export by people in foreign countries, or maybe a combination of the four. Cost-push inflation is an increase in the general price level associated with an increase in the cost of production. Cost-push inflation is the result of the seller side. In other contexts, inflation happens due to the increase in the cost of supply price of goods caused by an increase the cost of input. Cost-push inflation can be caused by various factors such as wage-push inflation, profit-push inflation, and import-push inflation. Wage-push inflation. It happens due to an increase in the wage level, which will cause an increase in the cost of production and the output price. If trade unions can present a united front, then they can bargain for the higher wage. Rising wages are a key cause of cost-push inflation because wages are the most significant cost for many firms. 2 is profit-push inflation. It happens when curtailed producers stock up on goods and create an artificial shortage, which will increase the price of goods and give them higher profits. This is more likely to occur during strong economic growth. Number 3, import-push inflation. It occurs when the price of imported raw materials or finished goods increase. This may be due to the fluctuation of the foreign exchange rate. This will lead to an increase in production costs and eventually an increase in the price outputs. Increase in government printing money or money supply is causing monetary inflation. This is because the money supply plays an important role in determining price. If there is more money chasing the same amount of goods, then price will rise. Hyperinflation is usually caused by an extreme increase in the money supply.
The first difficulty is redistribution salary and wages. The danger of inflation is it has an impact that is regressive to people that has low income, especially for families with low income rates and older people that might depend on income that set in fixed or certain rates. The incomes will decrease and falling sharply if the price increase quickly than wages and salary. Because of that, it will cause the redistribution wages and prosperity to the people that can protect from inflation by protect the property in advantage way that profitable. The second is bad profit value. For example, if someone having account in bank has profit value lower than inflation rates, the citizen that only depend on their deposit only will be more impoverished. In UK and other countries, the profit of inflation rate for millions of savers has been bad for minimum 4 years. Hyperinflation has harmed the saving words, and of course, it also will be a fact to reveal for the debt that has high interest. The third is government expense. The increase in inflation will cause the government to raise the value of pension and advantage for jobless people. The other health sentiment will also be affected because the high rise of living costs. The fourth is the inflation assumption and salary request. The increase of pay claim will cause if inflation become high. It is because people will try to protect their earnings totally. It also will cause the raise of the unit worker cost and lower the interest for business. However, not all workers can demand their salary for higher values. Besides that, the assumption for rising inflation will change. If there is an inflation in the economy, it is very hard to destroy it. The next is the quality of business in country and global level. On some countries face to the high inflation value, the export price of the product and service will less competitive in market. The effect is the request in export will decrease, the world profit also will low and less job opportunities. It also will harm the quality of commercial to that country. The quality of cost will be bad. Next, the decrease of the quantity in country income will happen as a result of the drop of quality export in market. The last is the lack of business and investment organizing. Some field will uncertain about the cost and price of the product in market. This is because the instability of inflation value in country. This maybe can cause the country will exhaust the investment in low value and then will harm the production growing and the potential of long-term profit in the country.
Benefit of low inflation rate and how to attain low rate inflation. Why government should aim to attain the low inflation? That was because majority of economists give advice to keep the rate of inflation in the lowest. Low inflation give benefit to countries. For example, stability. Firm can predict future cost and price. Second, investment. Low inflation encourage investment. Third, real saving. Low inflation prevents savers seeing fall in real value of saving. Fourth, competitiveness. Low inflation means country export relative more competitive. How to attain low rate inflation? There are many ways to attain low inflation. For example, first, monetary policy. The central bank can boost interest rate if inflation exceeds its target. Higher interest rate boost borrowing costs, limit lending, and lower consumer expenditure. This decreases inflationary pressure while also moderating economic growth. Second, control money supply. Monetarists emphasize regulating the money supply because they believe there is a clear link between money supply increase and inflation. Third, fiscal policy. If inflation is high, the government can use tight fiscal policy to reduce inflationary pressure. Inflation is rarely controlled through fiscal policy. Last, supply side policy. Supply side strategy can lessen some inflationary pressure in the long run. Wage growth has been lower and inflation has been lowering as a result of weaker union.
Next, we are going to focus on what can cause the sustained increase in the rate of inflation. Number one is wage price spirals. Wage price spiral is when workers get a rise in wages, they tend to spend more, increasing the cost for firms. When this happens, the next workers and unions will need to ask for a rise in their salary so that they can maintain their real incomes. Number two is and expectations. Number 2 is and expectations. The rate of inflation is sustained because of the expectation from workers. This means that firms will be looking to increase price and workers will be look for an increase in their salary. Inflation can also be happening due to the fact that workers expect the rate of price rise to be the same every year.
Introduction of hyperinflation in Venezuela. Venezuela is the first country with record for the highest inflation rate in history. Venezuela economy began to experience hyperinflation during the first year of Nicolas Maduro's presidency. Venezuela current economy, as of March 2014, had an inflation rate above 300%. The money supply of Bolivar floater in Venezuela increased 74% in 2014. From our study, inflation in Venezuela gives big impact for their economy and society. Inflation in Venezuela gives effect on economy through exchange rate value. Every year, the value of Venezuela currency, Venezuelan Bolivar, record a depreciation during the opening of the floating currency system. At the same time, inflation may lower productivity since import of capital equipment and machinery may become too expensive.
Inflation in Venezuela also cause an effect to the society there. So now I'm going to focus on what's the effect of inflation to the society in Venezuela. The first one is unemployment. Unemployment in Venezuela has been increasing since the crisis happened. In January 2016, the unemployment was 18.1 and the economy was the worst in the world according to the Misery Index. Unemployment is expected to increase to 39% to 40% by the end of 2019. Next is cost of living. Cost of living in Venezuela is very high. Minimum salary is less than $7 a month. Most of their salary is spent on food and water supplies. They have to live a hard life. Inflation has made them to live a poor existence.
How Venezuela reduce inflation rate? Venezuela has been ravaged by massive hyperinflation for years. Venezuela's annual inflation rate in 2018 exceeded 80,000%, according to the report. To put this in perspective, with this pace of inflation, prices are practically double every 2 weeks. Inflation rates this high haven't been witnessed since the 2000 in Zimbabwe and the 1920 in Germany. A political power struggle lies beneath the current economic catastrophe. First is dollarization in general, the process through which residents of a country begin to use a foreign currency in addition to or instead of the home currency is known as dollarization. It can happen unofficially without the government's formal approval, or formally when the government stops issuing home currency and switch to using a foreign one. Asset substitution and currency substitution are the two stages of unofficial dollarization, according to the economists. Remember that money serves as a store of value, a means of payment, and a unit of account. During the asset substitution stage, 28 citizens shift their wealth to overseas bonds and foreign bank deposits as safe havens. Before debating whether or not Venezuela should fully dollarize, it worth noting that the country has already undergone unofficial dollarization. Since the value of the Bolivar dropped, Venezuelans have been experiencing currency substitution. Furthermore, millions of migrants who have fled the country have been contributing roughly $4 billion every year to their families who remain in the country. It's worth noting that the money returned is in US dollar. Number 2 is financing from abroad. A massive stabilization plan like the one needed to reboot Venezuela's economy will necessitate outside funding. Foreign help will be used to stabilize price, provide relief to citizens, finance debt, improve credibility for the sustainability of reform, and protect the currency peg if one is imposed in the form of loans, grants, or foreign aid. It is important to note that foreign funding cannot be used to replace structural reform. Next, ending human rights abuse is another option for Venezuelan administration to gain confidence to give financing. Particularly, the state has done stop denying political opponents. It is impossible to overstate the necessity of obtaining this foreign financial support. As previously stated, at least some of this money will be used to help the government pay off its tremendous debt, with 65 to 70 billion in outstanding bonds that have been in default since 2017. Debt restructuring is a crucial part of the effort to get things back on track. By implementing the counter-inflation policies, Venezuela may be able to secure more international funding.
The third way how Venezuela reduce their rate inflation is switch the method of calculate inflation value. In September 2014, Venezuela had changed their method to calculate inflation value. Reportedly, they have changed their old method, which is Las-Perez price index method, to Fisher price index. The effect is the country's statistic about inflation. For example, June inflation data has decreased from 5.7% to 4.4%. For July month, it has changed from 5.5% value to 4.1%, and August it from 4.3% to 3.9%. It was reportedly that time was like economy war to Venezuelan. Venezuelan was prevented from carrying out producing activities and supplying of basic goods. The fourth way is petro-cryptocurrency plans. In December 2017, Venezuela President has launched a new policy that called petro-cryptocurrency as a new way to overcome inflation crisis in their country. It was lucky because oil, gasoline, and gold and diamonds saving helped them to make this plan success. This plan was allow Venezuela to have a power to conduct exclusive laws in their country. It also states that policy was made a new way of global financial that has in Venezuela. In January 2018, the president was stated that Venezuela would release 100 million tokens of petrol. He declared that the plan can make the all of publication value more than $6 billion. He also made an advisor group to work as a basic institution, political and a law for petrol. However, the opposition party was not agree with the Venezuela president plan. This is because they declare that it will increase more debt by a government that craving money. In addition, many people assume the petrol is a scam because there was no proof that the plan was a successful plan. The last way that Venezuela used is change to a large money note. In March 2018, Venezuela president stated that the government would reform the currency to a new one. The current currency, which is Bolivar Fuerte, will change to Bolivar Soberano, and it also will be reassessed at a ratio 1 to 1,000. By June 2019, this plan has made an effective way. It was said that the banknotes in 1,000, 2,000 and 50,000 Bolivar Soberano had begun to be used on 13 June. It was stated that this change will make the payment system more systematic and easy to deal in business. It was estimated that the former currency exchange rate was 600 to 1,044 Bolivar Soberano per US dollar in 14 June 2019. It also resulted that exchange rate was in higher value by mid-August 2019. As stated by a Venezuelan economist, the exchange rate was about 30,000% compared to the last year before.
Conclusion. To conclude, the inflation that has happened in Venezuela was caused by government failure. Until now, Venezuela still remains the country whose inflation rate is more than 15%. It takes more time and challenging for Venezuela to reduce inflation rate plus in this pandemic COVID-19. No words can describe the situation that has happened in Venezuela because it is the worst in world history. The Venezuelan was unemployed and could not afford to buy some food. From hyperinflation, more people are starving and resulting in education crisis and also lack of public services. Venezuela government has taken many actions to control this hyperinflation. Though it takes time to reduce the inflation rate, taking actions can make a big difference. So, managing inflation is important because if it happens and does not do any action, it will get worse and will create more crises. When more crises were created, then more money to expend.